Well, hi, everybody. I want to thank David for inviting me to speak. I made a promise to the Blessed Mother over 20 years ago that whenever I was asked to speak, I would. And I would never say no. And to this day, I haven't. And it's literally brought me all around the world. The picture you saw there was my son, Brian, at St. Sebastian's. He's a player in the National Hockey League right now, playing for the Florida Panthers, and contract is up, so who knows where it is next year. But, you know, in the story, if you've heard about the story at all, you'll know that I was diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer. And Brian himself has gone through leukemia, and his own son has gone through some stuff. So, you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little story. And it's my story. You can take what you want from it. I'm not going to tell you what to think or what not to think. It's just the way it is. That book, by the way, I just wanted to show you, is published in Italian, Croatian, Polish, and English, and the message is getting out around the world. And it's probably one of the simplest books you'll ever read. If you get a chance, it's in the library or something, pick it up. It'll take you about 2 hours, unless you're a speed reader, and you'll be done with it. And it's just a book of hope. My name is Artie Boyle. I live in Hingham, Massachusetts. I've been married to my wife, Judy, for 46 years. We have 13 children, which is probably more than most people you guys know. We have 8 boys and 5 girls. We have 24 grandchildren, so we're very, very blessed. You guys may have heard a story or a phrase like, God has a plan in your life. I know you're at a Catholic school, and I don't know what your denomination is. I'm coming from a Catholic perspective, so that's just how I was raised. So that's where I'm going to come from. I'm not going to preach, but I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. But you heard God has a plan in your life. Everybody's heard that. And in my life, Judy and I got married at a very young age. She was 18, I was 19. We both had to leave college. Neither one of us had a job. And this was back in 1974, and everybody said, you're not going to make it. Well, 46 years later, 13 kids, 24 grandkids, we're doing pretty good. We live in a really nice community in Hingham, too. You see the clapping, yay. It's all good. Our oldest boy, our second child, was born autistic. To have an autistic child at any age is a very difficult thing, but Artie was the first autistic child in Hingham. We had no idea what to do. We were 20 and 21 years old at the time, and no idea. But after all kinds of research, especially on my wife's part, Artie has learned many things. One of those, he's become an unbelievable swimmer with the Special Olympics. He's won gold medals. And Artie is now our easiest child by far, and everybody loves Artie. My 8th child was born Joseph Anthony, and died at the age of 2 months from sudden infant death syndrome. The most devastating thing that ever happened to our family. To get over the death of a child at any age is just pretty much impossible. So you just kind of move on, and through prayer and tears, you just get through it. And what you learn is that life is a great gift from God, and we need to cherish every moment we have. And at the age of 44, I got cancer. And when someone tells you you have cancer, and someone tells you you have 6 months to live, you don't necessarily think that's a good thing. But in my case, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It brought me back to God. I was always a convenient Catholic. We raised our children in the faith, brought them to church because that's what I was supposed to do. But until my experience in Medjugorje, where I was healed from cancer, I didn't understand what my faith really meant. And then I jumped into it, but I'm jumping ahead right now. In September of 1999, I got sick. When I was in college, I played hockey, baseball, and soccer. 3 different sports. I had to leave school. When I left school, I became an avid golfer. I had a couple of buddies that were on the golf team, roomies. When they would hit a golf ball, I was astounded by how they could hit it. I said, man, I got to do that. And I became addicted to golf. I couldn't play 4 holes of golf without having to stop. There was something burning inside my body. At my wife's suggestion, I went and I got a physical, showed I was anemic, unusual for a man, so I went on and had more tests. The test revealed I had severe erosive esophagitis, or Barrett's esophagus, which is a common malady. They put me on a medicine and said, come back in a month. A month later, I went back to see the doctor. I lost 45 pounds. My skin was that gray cancer color. My face was caved in. I was totally exhausted. And they said, apparently the medicine hasn't worked yet. We're going to keep you on it for another month. Had I done that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys today. I went home and I told Judy what the doctor said. She said, that's crazy. We're going to get you into a Boston hospital. They called Mass General and they said, yeah, we can see your husband in about a month. So she started to pray. As she prayed, a good friend that lived 200 miles away happened to be in the neighborhood, came in. Judy told him my story. He said, my sister works at Mass General, made a phone call. 2 days later, I had an appointment. I went in there, they did so many tests, they found nothing. Finally, I said, my daughter's a medical school student. She thinks I should have a CT scan, which they agreed to, sent me to an off-site facility. As I was getting the CT scan, which is a very basic test, if you haven't even heard of it, it's you lie on a table, they slide you in and out of a big donut, and they tell you to hold your breath. That's all it is, it's simple. They told me I wasn't breathing right, they needed to take more tests. At the time, I didn't know what they were talking about. Afterwards, the technician said, the results will be ready in a day or two, and off I went. As I was driving home from this off-site facility, something was pulling me back toward the Mass General, and I drove in that direction. And as I got close, my cell phone rang. The doctor was on the phone, or the doctor's secretary saying, the doctor needs to see you immediately. I went up to his office, he was waiting for me in his doorway. He sat me down, looked me in the eye, and he said, you have renal cell carcinoma, cancer of the kidney. The intensity of that statement I will never forget. You immediately think, how much time do I have left? Who's going to take care of these 13 kids? Who's going to teach the boys to play ball? Who's going to protect the girls from the boys? All this crazy stuff goes through your head in an instant. He said to me, I need to send you to see an oncologist immediately. And I stumbled out of his office and I went to the cancer ward at Mass General. I sat there for 3 hours. When I was finally able to lift my head out of my hands and look around the room, I could see there were people in that room a lot worse off than I was. And I started to think to myself, I can beat this cancer. I can fight this. I've been athletically trained. I know what to do. Not once did I think of God. The doctor brought me in, brought up on the computer monitor the pictures they had just taken. Showed a kidney the size of a tumor the size of my fist on my kidney. The pancreas was wrapped around the tumor, and the spleen and lymph nodes were infected as well. It was not a pretty picture. The doctor said to me, I need to send you to see a urologist immediately and have all this cut out. Next day, I took my wife at 8 a.m. to see Dr. Frank McGovern at Mass General Hospital. She was going to ask all the questions. I was too blown away. We got in to see Dr. McGovern, and he's a surgeon. They're pragmatic. They don't pull any punches. He said, it's going to be a horrible surgery. I'm going to have a pancreatic surgeon in the operating room. We need to take some of the pancreas. It's going to bleed through the wound. And for 40 minutes, he went on to tell us how terrible this surgery is going to be. And my wife did not say a single word during the entire consultation. I later found out she was praying and she was rebuking everything he said. Surgery was scheduled for December 9th of 1999. We had 21 days. In the gospel in James 5:14-16, it says, are you sick? If so, go see the presbyters of the church, the priests, the leaders, and have them pray over you. My wife and her sisters took this literally. They put my name on the novena to St. Anthony, put it in all the churches south of Boston. People were praying everywhere. We went to healing masses because we didn't know what else to do. They would lay hands on you with the healing masses. I never experienced anything like this. It was very powerful. But there was one healing service that I went to that I will never forget. Just because you have cancer, you still have to go to work. Nothing changes. Somebody's got to support. So I'm at work and Judy called me up and she said, listen, I want you to be ready. I'm going to take you to a healing service at the Mission Church in Roxbury, Mass. It's a basilica in Boston. That's a healing shrine. And there was a Father Ed McDonough that was going to be presiding. Now, she said, I want you to be ready. Now, I do everything my wife tells me. So I was ready. She picked me up. I locked my car door. I got into her car, and on the radio was a priest talking to a woman about Blessed Faustina. Never heard of her before. We're driving into Boston, and I'm listening to this story. Now I know St. Faustina very well, the Chapel of Divine Mercy. If you haven't heard of it, it's a great story. But we're also driving in. Judy looked at me and she said, I need to get you a miraculous medal. It has great power. At the time, I didn't wear any jewelry. We arrived at the church. I knelt in the back of that church, and for the first time in my life, I prayed with my heart. To pray with your heart means to pray with love and to let go and truly give control to God. very difficult, especially for a man. While I was doing that, something physical struck me in the chest and knocked me backwards in the pew. And I looked at Judy and I said, "What was that?" She said, "What was what?" We continued to pray. Father McDonough prayed over me. This unbelievable warmth went up through my body, and my skin color changed from the gray cancer color back to my normal skin color right in front of my wife's eyes. The next day, I had my bloods tested. They were back to normal, scientific improbability. That day, she dropped me at work. She went back home. And on the voice message at home was a woman from the parish saying, "Mrs. Boyle, you don't know me, but I've been praying for your husband Artie on the Mavine to St. Anthony. I lost the relic 6 months ago. I found it. I want Artie to have it. It's a relic of Blessed Faustina." That day, I get into my car to go home. I unlock the door, and there's a miraculous medal on a man's chain on the passenger seat. I picked up my cell phone. I called my wife, and I said, "That was fast. How'd you do that?" She said, "Do what?" To this day, we have no idea how the medal got there. Nobody in the family claims to have done it, and we pass it around to those in need. I started to realize that God was trying to make an impression on me that I probably should start to listen. On December 8th, the day before my surgery, my parish had an all-night prayer vigil for me. Started with Mass, and then they prayed all night long. I coached a hockey team of 8-year-old kids at the time. They came up the center pew with their hockey jerseys and put them over the front banister. That was followed by the varsity hockey team who did the same thing, praying for their coach. Very powerful stuff. The next day, I went into the Mass General. Mass General was a training hospital. Didn't know that. The anesthesiologist who was going to administer an epidural was in training. An epidural, for those that don't know, is they stick a needle in your spine and it numbs your whole lower half. They were literally cutting me in half from my belly button all the way up my back. Well, the epidural fell out during the operation. So I woke up without any pain meds. And I'm telling you this for a reason. The pain was so intense that I was in and out of consciousness. While I was in there, they discovered a nodule in my thyroid that had to come out, and the anesthesia screwed up once again. The good thing that happened was that when the doctor, the surgeon, went in to take a piece of the pancreas, a membrane had grown between the pancreas and the tumor, protecting the pancreas. They took out the tumor, the kidney, the adrenal gland, whatever else they had to take out, and they never touched the pancreas, which still sits in the kidney bed today. A few weeks later, the pathology report came back. The doctor called me on his cell phone saying, "This is fantastic. We got it all. The margins are clear. You're going to live a normal life. Congratulations." I was stunned. I didn't expect to hear that. I sat there and I hugged my phone and I'm like, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for saving me and let me stay with my family. Tell me what I can do. I will do anything." I listened. I didn't hear anything. I didn't do anything. Very typical of a man. Right back into the rat race, chasing the almighty dollar. I didn't change one single thing in my life. Well, once you're a cancer patient, especially of that significance, you have to keep going back for tests. 3 months later, back in for more scans. 8 months later, same technicians once again. They said I wasn't breathing right. They needed to take more pictures. Afterwards, they said, "You might want to go back and see your doctor." This time when I went in to see him, he brought up on the monitor once again the pictures that showed 3 tumors in my right lung. The cancer had metastasized. Metastatic renal cell carcinoma back in 2000 had no cure. There was no chemo, there was no radiation, there were no therapies at all. It was only extraction. The next trip was to the thoracic surgeon. This time I brought my daughter and her husband who were in medical school. They would ask all the questions. And when I get in there, I noticed that I sat in front of him and he was behind his big desk. And that's where they sit for their protection when they got to give you the bad news. And he said to me, "I'm going to cut open your ribs. I'm going to take out your lung. I'm going to put it on the table. I'm going to make sure I feel with my hands that I get all the cancer." Well, after the 2 previous surgeries I had on the thyroid and the kidney, I said, in my own mind, I said, "There's no way this guy's going to touch me. I would rather die than go through that pain again." My daughter and her husband disagreed. They said everything the doctor is saying is accurate. Surgery was scheduled for September 14th of 2000. The doctor looked at me when I was ready to leave. He said, "Go home and put your house in order. You have less than 5% chance to survive." I don't know why they tell you that stuff, because it only takes your hope away. That night I went home. My 8-year-old son, Timmy, said, "Daddy, you're going to die." We had no answers. All we could do was pray. My brother-in-law, Kevin Gill, who is my best friend, and another friend, Rob Griffin, the two guys you see that are on this book, they played golf together a couple of days later. They'd never played golf together before. They didn't even know each other. Robbie said to Kevin, how's Artie doing? Kevin said, not too good, told him the story. Robbie said to Kevin, have you ever heard of Medjugorje? Kevin never heard of it, so they talked about it for 18 holes. Kevin called me up afterwards and said, Artie, have you ever heard of Medjugorje? Now, I don't know how many of you guys have heard of Medjugorje, but Medjugorje is a little village in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the old Yugoslavia, that in 1981, the Blessed Mother started appearing before 6 children. It was a communist country at the time. To this day, 39 years later, 3 of those children still receive daily apparitions. The Vatican has approved the first 7 days, and we can get into that. I don't have time for that stuff right now, but it's an incredible place. Kevin and I really didn't ever hear of it. Kevin said to me, do you want to go? And when he asked me that question, something stirred inside me, and I said, yes. We had no idea where we were going. We were so unsure of the location. We packed 2 suitcases full of food and water because we thought we were going to a third world country where they wouldn't have any of that stuff. We didn't know anything. We were ignorant. When we got there, everything changed. It was remarkable. When I got on the plane to go to Medjugorje, all 3 of us had kept a journal. And I wrote in my journal, I'm going to Medjugorje to see the Blessed Mother and to be healed. And although I may not actually see her, I know I'll be touched by her in some way. Faith defined in the gospel is the confident assurance of things hoped for and the evidence of things yet unseen. I wrote in that book, the confident assurance of things hoped for, and I would later get the evidence of things yet unseen. The way I would describe Medjugorje is a place of supernatural peace. In the center of the village, and it is a village, is a church called the Church of St. James. It's a church that holds probably 1,000 or 1,100 people, standing room only. The village had 95 families. Why would they build such a big church? This was way before the apparition started. To the left of that church were the boxes, the confessionals. And Robbie, Kevin, and I hadn't been to confession, and the Catholic faith confession's a big thing. We hadn't been there in 30 years. So we said to ourselves, if we're going to do this thing, if we're going halfway across the world, we might as well do it right. So the first thing we're going to do before we go to Mass is go to confession. And we did that. Then we went into the church. And they were praying the rosary before Mass, and when 1,100 people squished together, start singing the Ave Maria with conviction between the decades, it literally lifts your soul into heaven, and I knew I was in the right place. Robbie had arranged for us to have a guide. The guide was the cousin of one of the 6 children, Visca. Visca was going to pray over me. Each of the visionaries has a task, or many tasks, but several, and Visca's one of her tasks was to pray for the sick. Pray for priests, pray for youth, pray for family, etc. Hers was to pray for the sick. So she was going to pray over me. It was a great grace. However, when we came out of church, Jelka said to us, I'm sorry, I have bad news. Visca had to go to Rome to visit a sick friend. She won't be able to pray over me. Disappointing, but we were in Medjugorje. We were in Medjugorje from September 4th till September 10th. My surgery was scheduled for the 14th. It was truly a trip of desperation. The next day we went to Mass. After Mass, Jelka said, what would you like to do? We said, we'd like to get our wives something nice. So she took us to a little jewelry store down the street called Leo's. To this day, Leo and I are very good friends. We shopped for 45 minutes for jewelry. Usually guys go in, bang, they grab something, they run out the door. We spent 45 minutes. I bought 5 rosary bead bracelets for my daughters, and I was buying gold crosses and chains for my sons, and I was thinking, man, this is expensive. But then I said to myself, or was thinking, if I can spend the money I spend on golf and hockey and everything else I waste money on, I can certainly spend it on Jesus. As that thought entered my head, there was a commotion immediately to my left. Kevin comes over, puts his arm around me, says, you know who that is standing right next to you? I looked, there was a small woman. I said, no, it was Visca. She had stopped in that jewelry store. She had missed her plane from the night before. She was buying a rosary ring for a friend, and she was now standing right next to me. Jelka explained who I was. She immediately started to pray. She put her little hand on my forehead. Robbie and Kevin put their hands on my back, and she prayed with such intensity that the heat that went through my body caused them to sweat. That was the beginning of our trip to Medjugorje. In Medjugorje, there's a mountain called Cross Mountain, Mount Križevac. In 1933, the villagers built a 15-ton cross at the top of this mountain because the storms were so bad they wanted to protect the crops. There's a long story to that too, but there's a story. But it was said the Blessed Mother prays at the top of that mountain every day at sunrise with her son Jesus. I wanted every grace possible. We're going up that mountain. As we're passing the church of St. James, Kevin looked over at the confessionals and said, you know, guys, I think I forgot a couple things. I'm going back to confession. Kevin went back. Robbie and I went to the room. After a little while, the door bursts open. Kevin comes flying into the room saying, you got to go back to confession. There's a priest there from Liverpool, England. He's only going to be there 5 more minutes. He was so convicted in what he was saying that the three of us got up and sprinted down Main Street, Medjugorje, to go to a place we tried to avoid the last 30 years, the confessional. When I got into the confession, I met Father Simon Cadwallader from Liverpool, England, the most beautiful, spiritual, soft-spoken priest that I'd ever met. My confession was the first sincere confession of my life. When I stepped into that confessional, my doctor had told me I had less than 5% chance to live. He told me basically I was going to die. The anxiety and the depression that weighs on you so heavily makes it hard to put one foot in front of the other when someone tells you that. During that confession, Father Simon said to me, the Eucharist is the most powerful medicine we have on earth. Take Jesus into your body as often as possible and ask him to heal you. He told me many other things. He could sense a building excitement in Kevin, Robbie, and I. And he said to me in the words of St. Francis, when you go back to Boston, preach the gospel, but when you have to, use words. He said, don't go back and tell people about Medjugorje. They're going to think you're a whack job. Just go back and live your life. They will ask you why. We did that, and that's exactly what happened. When I left that confessional, the anxiety and the depression that had been weighing so heavily on me was gone, completely lifted. And I instantly realized that I was invited to Medjugorje not necessarily for a physical healing, but certainly for a spiritual healing. And what I learned from this experience was that in order for us to be physically healed, which we can be of any ailment, malady, physical, spiritual, emotional, whatever, we need to be an open vessel for the Holy Spirit to heal us, to come into us. And one of the ways we do that is through confession, I realized. The second way I'll get to in a second. We left there and went up the mountain. It was a rainy day. They told us not to go, but we were 3 stubborn guys. We went up the mountain. On the way up the mountain, I could feel a pain in my leg. It was burning. I could put my finger on it, and I said, man, this is getting worse. Not having any idea what was going on. We got to the top of that mountain. Usually, if you know anything about Medjugorje, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people on that mountain. There was nobody there. Robbie, Kevin, and I were at the top of the mountain, crying out at the top of our lungs for Jesus to heal me. We were embracing. We were weeping. We were just looking for a miracle. We were doing things in Medjugorje that we would never do in downtown Hingham or anywhere where our friends would see us. It would be too embarrassing. We came off that mountain. I called my wife and I said, I don't know what is going on over here, but please call the doctor and get another CT scan before they cut out my right lung because something's happening. She did that. The doctor called me and left a cell phone message saying, Mr. Boyle, we know you're in Medjugorje. We know why you're there. The fact is, you have cancer. It's not going to go away. We're going to go ahead and do the surgery. My wife did what any good wife would do. She got another doctor. This doctor, I would later find out, had sent his parents to Medjugorje and had a picture of Medjugorje hanging in his office wall. God was working on my behalf. Before we left Medjugorje, there's one more thing that had to happen. Father Jozo Zovko, the original pastor of Medjugorje, during the communist regime, didn't believe the children initially and told them to stop because he said, listen, if you talk about anything outside the church, the communists will arrest us, throw the families inside, especially if you see in the Blessed Mother. You can't do that. Told them to stop. They didn't. Not only did they not stop, they brought the entire village up the mountain with them. he was arrested and thrown in jail for 18 months. When he was let out of jail, he went to a place called Medjugorje. They wouldn't let him go to Medjugorje. We wanted every grace possible, so I wanted him to pray over me. When we went to see him, we met a couple of his translators, Nancy and Patrick Latta, who said, please come see us before you leave. We said we would, but there was a commotion that happened. We lost track. On the day we're leaving Medjugorje, a woman approached and said, do you want to go see Nancy? We said, of course. And we followed through the grapevines. It's beautiful over there. The vistas are incredible. We arrived at a castle, literally. We're standing around the courtyard. Everybody disperses except for Rob, Kevin, Nancy, and me. Kevin gives her a pen and paper to take her information. She bows her head to pray. She looks up, she looks me in the eye, and she said, you need to forgive. I forgive? I've been to confession twice. I got nothing left. She said, you need to forgive your mother and father. And my mother and father had just gotten divorced after 43 years of marriage. And I had no idea how bad that was affecting me. And I immediately broke down. Robbie and Kevin broke down, healing tears in Medjugorje. I called my wife. I said, please have my father, my mother, my entire family, brothers, sister, kids, spouses, everybody at the house when I get there. I brought my father up in front of the family, and I forgave him for divorcing my mother. My mother didn't like it, but she knew it was something I had to do. What I learned in Medjugorje is that we can literally be healed of anything. Attitude has a lot to do with it, but God has a lot more to do with it. But we need to be an open vessel for God to be able to heal us. We can't have a lot of junk stored inside. And we hold on to stuff and bury it so deep inside of us that we need to pray for the grace to know what it is we need to forgive. And that was my case. I came home. I went for the CT scan 2 days before my operation. They told me I wasn't breathing right. They needed to take more pictures. Brought the film to the doctor, ran up to his office. I was so excited. He told me to wait. And after a few minutes, instead of sitting behind his big desk to give me the bad news, he was standing in the threshold, rubbing his fingers to his chin, saying, they're gone. The large tumor in the upper lobe had completely disappeared, and 2 small tumors had shrunk to such an insignificant size that on September 14th, the feast of the Triumph of the Cross, instead of having my right lung cut out, I was playing golf with Robbie and Kevin. There's so much more to the story. I've been to Medjugorje 19 times. I've brought many people over there. Some have received a miraculous physical healing, and some have received what I consider the greatest healing, and that's to die and to go to heaven. All we want to do is be prepared for what our faith tells us, and that's what we try to do with these people. My own family, we went over with 4 families, the Griffins, the Gills, the O'Donohues, and me. There were 27 of us. 2 of my kids really didn't want to go. One of them was my daughter. She went kicking and screaming. Another one was my son, kind of lost. My daughter came back, and then the next 2 years went and worked in Medjugorje for 6 weeks with Nancy and Patrick Latta. Came back and started teaching theology at Cathedral High School in Boston, and now works at the Archdiocese of Boston, New Evangelization. My son Christopher came back from Medjugorje, started working theology, teaching 7th and 8th grade boys at Catholic Memorial, coaching football and swimming. And after 11 years, entered the seminary at St. John's. For 2 years, they sent him to Rome for 4 years, and was ordained last May a priest in the Archdiocese of Boston. Things the Blessed Mother did with our children that we never could have done. So, God has the ability to do things that you can't imagine. The Blessed Mother is his intercessor. And when I first went to Medjugorje, I believed, I loved the Blessed Mother. I was afraid of Jesus. But when I got there, all of that changed. In Medjugorje, there are 5 basic messages. One of them is to pray the rosary. It's to pray with your family. She said in one of her messages to the children, dear children, there can be no peace on this earth until there is peace in the family. And there can be no peace in the family until we pray as a family. Whatever your religion or faith is, prayer is very important. And prayer is not necessarily rote like the rosary. It could be sitting around the table having dinner. It could be just time together. There's all forms of prayer. The other thing she said is Go to Holy Mass. That's where my son is. These kids, not kids anymore, they're all adults, see the Blessed Mother just as you see each other. And she said to them, if you have an opportunity to come see me or to go to Holy Mass, do not come see me. Go to my son at Holy Mass. She invites us to put the Bible in a place of prominence in our home because it's the Word of God. It's our sustenance. She invites us to go to confession because she knows how hard this life is. And she invites us to fast on things that we want because it gives us a discipline over our bodies. If you guys are student athletes, you'll understand what discipline is because you have to train. You have to eat the right things. You have to work out. Why do you do that stuff? So you can be better. You don't do it for any other reason. You do it to get better at what you're trying to do. Fasting is our discipline. It's how we get better at prayer. And if you want to be better at prayer, you pray more. That's one of her messages also. In Paul's letter to the Galatians, he said he was crucified with Christ, that he no longer lives. My prayer to all of you is that you are crucified with Christ, that you no longer live, and that Jesus Christ will live in you. Thank you, and God bless you.